work in their countries, they're going to be the future of this economy. They're going to lead this economy out of the crisis that we are now facing. And how exactly is this going to be done, and why we think it's really, really important. I'm going to talk to you about how this measurement, how we're making them more attractive, it's going to make them more attractive to prospective employers. I'm going to show you that by lowering those wages and making them have more attractive labor contracts, it's going to actually take them to actually work and gain experience. So what we see is the problem now. We see that the businesses, they choose older people to work and not young people. And why? Because they don't have the experience, which we find that it's something really important to have when somebody is working. We need them to know what they're doing, they need to be educated. So what we do with that, we make, we say that those workers, the youth, they're going to be cheaper and easier actually to hire. So this actually makes a company want to hire them and makes it more even between experience and actually being more profitable and more beneficial for a company to have. And why the companies do need, no thank you, they need the companies, it's beneficial to them because they're going to see what they want. If that employer is what they want, or educate them in a way that it works for the company, and that's exactly why they're going to hire them. And they're going to give them the experience, ladies and gentlemen, that they do need. We see now that there are a lot of companies, we see that there are a lot of companies that actually are in a place that they need more workforce. They need, they're not in the best situation, but they don't do it because they don't have enough money, or they don't have enough resources, etc., etc. And we see that those companies, they are going to take those younger workers because it's going to be beneficial to them, because they're going to be more eager to work, they're going to be more vital, all the things that young people do have.
Let's assume that the company does have the money to pay them. What's their incentive then to comply with higher regulations and provide higher wages and more protection to their employees?
Actually, if you're talking about when they grow older, they're going to have the same. They're going to gain the experience when they are younger, and after that they're going to follow the rules that apply to the rest of the workers. We don't see a problem there. The second thing that we have to say is that they have a competitive a disadvantage against the older, as I have been telling you. We're saying that they have this lack of experience, and what do we mean by that? When you're young and you're in the university and you have been studying for a while, it's really hard to actually go to you ask for a job, and probably they're not gonna take you. They're not because you don't have the experience. So we need to give this incentive. We need to get those young people actually getting into businesses. And what will happen then? Then they will start to actually realize exactly what is happening in the market. They're gonna actually find jobs that are suitable for them, and they're gonna be actually in the same place with the experienced older people and that they're gonna give them what exactly they need, which actually the experience and all the part to work and to enhance what they have already gotten through their studies. Yes.
Madam, what stops an employer or a company to stressing their current labor union into mitigating their own rights under the threat that they will be replaced by a bunch of 25-year-olds?
Actually, this is not going to happen because a company knows what exactly it needs in order to thrive. So experience is a really important stuff, an important thing. So not everybody's going to be fired, obviously. We see that the companies know that they cannot make a CEO of their company and just graduate just because it's cheaper. So those jobs that are going to be for the young people, or the jobs that are needed for them, is the ones that will start them inside the company, that we start from to learn the the basic stuff, and then to grow higher by aging and by experience and all these things that we have been telling you about. And this is what we're talking to you about, so we don't see that this is going to happen. So I've told you that those those young people are going to be more attractive to the business. They're going to hire them, and they're going to give them what they like, which is the experience. And that's why exactly we want to pass this measure. For these reasons, we beg you to propose.
I thank the speaker for those final remarks and welcome the leader of the opposition. Yeah.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Before I move on and explain to you basically first why, what's actually the value of these regulations and why they exist in the first place. Secondly, why does it not actually address the unemployment youth, and it doesn't actually resolve long-term the issue. And thirdly, why it undermines the labor regulations in general. I am going to explain, I'm going to give some rebuttal on what we have heard so far from side government. They came up here and they actually told us that the youth unemployment is because of the lack. The high percentage of the youth unemployment is because of the lack of experience. What they have failed to answer to us is, if the job actually needs and requires unemployment as what this youth is going to be employed in these companies, how is it actually going to be able to fulfill the positions that actually need and require the experience to get the job done? Who's going to get the job done eventually? So we kind of don't see exactly why, actually have failed to justify to us, apart from the fact that they're going to be cheaper, how exactly they're more appealing to the companies. No. Moving on, they also told us that, that after a while, after they stop being youth, the companies are going to start following the regulations that are going to be applying to the rest of the workers. What they have failed and kind of hidden in their case is that they not only make hiring more appealing and more easy for that youth, they also make firing them way easier, which basically means that no one guarantees us that those companies are actually going to keep that youth employed after they stop being youth, after they start to be more expensive workers, more less appealing. I'm gonna take off.
You do realize that you are talking about youth who is right now facing a choice not to work at all, or on the other side, to at least work, develop skills, develop experience.
Thank you. I am going to explain that into my constructive case, why you actually make that youth even more vulnerable into exploitation. Which brings me wonderfully into my first point, which basically is the value of labor regulations. We believe that there is a huge, imbalance of power between in the relationship between the employee and the employer. The employer can be very easily exploited by the employers who are looking for maximization and profits and to be profit or productive. They are we're looking for maximization of the profit or the production, which basically makes this relationship inherently exploitative. So we see that in countries with no regulations, for example, like Bangladesh, we have cases where factories collapse and 1,000 people die, exactly because they did not fulfill labor regulations. We believe that you need to protect the employee from what the free market creates. You need to protect the employee from exploitation. We do not think that it is fair or it would be fair for someone, and especially a young person, to be working for no money or for money or for some money that will not eventually be, enough to actually get you through everyday life. And what we're going to go on and say is that it's even more significant, that relationship, in times of economic crisis and in times of unemployment. People are desperate for work. It is going to be, it makes them anyway willing to sacrifice some of their, labor rights in order to be appealing and stay and keep their job. What you're actually going to do is make the youth that is even more vulnerable in that situation, even more willing to, put on extra hours and not actually get paid for them, in order to be exploited, in order to be appealing to the employers. And we believe that this is not okay. And we believe that this is not okay, Then this takes me to my second point, that because exactly this does not address the youth unemployment. It does not help the youth. Because they might give them work short term, but it is to be fired on the spot. There is no job security. And at the end of the day, it actually distorts the image of the issue of unemployment. The issue of unemployment is more of a structural issue than it is of an issue, how I'm going to raise to lower my unemployment, my youth unemployment side. So you might be able to lower, the youth unemployment from 6% to 40%, but that's going to be a short-term solution. It's not an actual, long-term solution. What you do is, take away of the political incentive to address the problem to its core and actually address it long-term. The issue is structural and not that much, what they're trying to make look like. So that is done through, in order to solve this, to create this long-term solution, we need to address the structural issue. Which is going to bring me to my third point, which is why it basically undermines the labor regulations in general. Exactly because, the market and the employers are kind of the elite who have other capital. If you give that political power to the capital, it's going to be even more hard later on to bring back those labor regulations, to re-establish them. It's going to be, it's going to be hard to raise those standards again into the society. You make it more difficult to re-establish and create again respect towards the employers. You give the political power to the capital, not only to control the employees, but to kind of control the government decisions in terms of labor regulations later on. Once something like that is decreased and it's lowered and the barrier is lowered, I think that it's going to be harder to come back for the above reasons in fact of course.
I thank the speaker and then we welcome the Deputy Prime Minister. Yes, here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Now, before I go on continuing my constructive case, I'd like to address the issue from the previous speaker from the side of the opposition, ladies and gentlemen. And there's quite a few things that we've heard from that side. First of all, this idea that they mentioned in the POI as well, and the previous speaker, like, what's the incentive then of a company to hire, to not just have young people and pay them less, right? And obviously there is an incentive because not all jobs can be filled by people with no or very little experience, right? Some jobs need experienced people in order to work them. But, on the other hand, not all of them do, right? And that's the problem we have now. When it costs you the same to hire someone that has the experience and someone that doesn't have the experience, even for a position that doesn't really require that experience, it makes sense for you to choose the experienced person, right? And that's why the older people have a competitive advantage. as Lisa was telling you before. But what we're saying is that not all jobs require that experience from the employee. So for those jobs, we think it's beneficial to have younger people working, and we think our measure provides for that. No, thank you. Right, and then she went on and told us basically that what we're saying is equivalent to what happens in Bangladesh, and factories are going to start collapsing for some reason. Alright, what we're saying is that you have a minimum wage here. For people under 26, it might be like 30% less. We're not saying we're going to turn Greece or the Eurozone or Europe into Bangladesh. That's a bit far-fetched, you think, right? And then they had this great idea how, it's not really good for the young people because they'll have to work for less money. And the point here to make is that, as Luisa mentioned, right, youth unemployment in this country, for example, is 60%. That is a huge number. And the question that we really should be asking here today is not whether it's perfect to live with a bit less money than the older person, but it's, would you rather live with no money at all, or would you rather live with some money? Because that is the choice, no thank you, that is the choice that young people are actually facing right now. And we think it's good to give them an option to actually have some source of income, rather than no source of income as the current situation is. And then, ladies and gentlemen, she was telling us, finally, the other thing that, this is a structural problem. Basically, the problem is capitalism, right? So as long as capitalism exists, nothing's going to fix. More or less, that's what she said. Okay, there is a structural problem, maybe. Maybe in the EU, there actually is a problem in terms of how the labor market works, etc., or the economy works. We can concede that. But the point is, in the meanwhile, right, until we fix the structural problem, we just cannot allow for 60% of youth unemployment. We have to do something in the meanwhile, even if that is a bit short term. Yeah.
So what you're going to do about it is turn the 60% youth unemployment into higher employment for older people?
No, I'm going to go into that in my constructive case. We're actually going to lower unemployment in general with this measure. So, moving on actually to my constructive case, right? Luisa told you what are the benefits for the young people. And I'm going to talk to you a bit about what the benefits are to the companies and what the benefits are to the general population, and exactly what you asked me at POI. And starting with the benefits to the businesses, to the companies. Why we think this is also good for the companies? What this is going to do is going to basically bring more young people into the workforce. More young people in the companies, which is basically going to turn our workforce, which is really aging right now, into a much younger workforce. And this, ladies and gentlemen, has numerous benefits for the companies, right? It brings in new ideas, new technologies, new skills that those young people have learned in their studies and that older people do not have. And and giving them the extra incentive of lower cost, we think that companies are more likely to adopt this, to invest in those young people, to gain these skill sets to affect their businesses. Yeah.
You agree that there is a structural problem. How is it solved in your world?
Right. The same way it's going to be solved in your world. One isn't these are not mutually exclusive things. What we're saying doesn't mean that anything you propose to solve the structural problem cannot work. Right? Two completely different issues. So what we're saying is that by bringing young people into the businesses, this will also benefit the businesses. You will bring innovation, you will bring new ideas, you will bring new technologies like information technologies and stuff like that. That 50-year-old workers just don't have at this time. And this is good for the companies that will become more innovative. And this in the end will lead to benefits for the whole economy, ladies and gentlemen. This will lead to progress. This will lead to a better economy overall. And now, this brings me to the second point, ladies and gentlemen, how this is going to improve the situation in general in terms of unemployment. Right? First of all, because companies are going to start flourishing more, because they're going to become more innovative, because they're going to be able to compete with companies in other countries in a much more meaningful way, that means that they will grow. That means job creation, ladies and gentlemen. That means more people will have the opportunity to work, and it's not just a case of recycling workers, so switching from old to young and then back, right? But the other thing is that because basically what you're doing for the companies at the end of the day is lowering the labor cost. That's what you do. And in this economy, and all those countries that are affected by youth unemployment have general problems in the economy, as they have told us, and we accept that, right? In this economy, companies many times need extra workers, or they would like to have them in order to grow, because it's sort of an investment. But they just don't have the funds to do it. They don't have the resources to do it. When you lower labor costs, when you have these people that will cost less, we think companies are very much likely to hire more people in general, and not just replace a couple of their workers. We think they're going to be able to afford more people in the company, and they're going to hire more people. So that way, you also lower unemployment in general. So, what have we told you today, ladies and gentlemen? My partner explained to you how this is going to directly benefit the young people because it gives them a competitive advantage against the old, and because it provides incentive for employers to hire them directly. And I've also told you how this is going to benefit the businesses themselves and the economy as a whole, and how this will also lead to lowering the unemployment at all age groups, and not just the young. So for all this reason, we're proud of the proposal.
I thank the previous speaker, and then we welcome the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, what I want to talk about in my speech is how this impacts on the labour force as a whole, why we think it doesn't solve the problems that the proposition is trying to solve. In fact, it makes it worse for everyone. Before I do that, a few things that we've heard from the proposition so far. We're really confused whether it stands for what significantly means in this debate, ladies and gentlemen, significantly reduced, because they're completely misrepresenting what our Bangladesh example was. We didn't say Greece is going to turn into Bangladesh all of a sudden just because you reduce labour regulations. But firstly, ladies and gentlemen, that example does show that capital can be ruthless, employers can be ruthless when there is no legal framework in place to protect employees, which is the case we hear from Elena in the first speech that doesn't get addressed by the proposition so far. But it also, their representation of what significantly means is they're going to work for slightly less than everyone else. The minimum wage is going to be slightly lower. It's going to be slightly easier to fire them, right? We think, ladies and gentlemen, that even though they're not turning Greece or the EU into Bangladesh, they have to consider the proposition that it's going to be an EU that looks very different for young people than what it does at the moment, right? We're talking about very different working conditions. No, thank you. Secondly, it's a question of what does unemployment and youth unemployment in the work, what does employment for youth look like in the proposition as well? Because their description, which is quite misrepresentative, is firstly that I go out, I find a job, it's a nice job, not only that I can have and get paid and I can live on the money that I'm making, but it's also a job where I can gain experience that's going to make my skills more marketable in the long term, though they can see that the jobs that can do that often are the ones that require people with the experience in the first place, and quite importantly, that I stay in that job long enough to gain that experience, ladies and gentlemen. No, thank you. By their own model, ladies and gentlemen, it becomes really easy to hire and fire people. So why would I stay in that job for long enough? We think, ladies and gentlemen, that in reality, it's still going to be difficult for people to find jobs because unemployment still exists in their world. Because it's going to be, no, thank you, people working really long hours in bad conditions for very little money, and doing that with a constant insecurity and fear of being able to get fired at any point just because your employer feels like you should get fired. No, thank you. Which is also, ladies and gentlemen, so it brings us to this very simplistic line that we've heard so far. No, thank you. But it's always better to work than not work, right? Like this is what we hear in the point of information. We also hear it from the second speaker. Yes, in the abstract as a statement, yes, it's better to work than not work. But okay, this debate is one of that, ladies and gentlemen, this is really not debate in the first place, right? Because what happens in reality here is we have to ask, first of all, is it actually a good thing if you're working for €300 a month and getting fired and have no benefits, no job security? No, thank you. And in my construction, I'm going to explain how we think that this reduces reduces the overall income that exists for societies, and consequently the flows of capital in the economy as a whole will making the economy weaker in general, right? We don't have more people getting hired necessarily, we just have less money being paid for employment. So in terms of the impact on unemployment as a whole, because we hear an interesting concession from the first speaker, right? It's not going to be a case of creating more jobs, it's a case of they're happy for companies and employers not to hire an older person and hire a younger person instead. So basically they're just accepting that to a large extent, they're just going to be reshuffling the unemployment numbers. Yes, youth unemployment is now at 60%, it's lower than that, but unemployment overall in society remains the same, it's just for someone else. Why is that something that is inherently good? We haven't heard that from the proposition. So essentially, ladies and gentlemen, they don't solve unemployment. They claim that we solve it in the same way in the problem the upside, but we don't, right? Because that's the analysis we hear from Eleni that says that when we don't hear about unemployment, when you reduce the numbers of youth unemployment by doing just a reshuffling of numbers around, what you actually have is simply people thinking this is no longer the problem. This is no longer an issue that is a pressing issue that requires painful changes, and at times painful and difficult decisions to be made. You reduce the political will and the capital that exists to make the changes that will make this sustainable in the long term. Before I move on to how this impacts on the labor force, go.
When people don't have a job and when they finally get a job and when they start earning money, their life standard starts increasing, which is the moment where they start asking for more rights, which is the moment when they realize there is an issue with lowering standards.
When exactly do you do that when you're working, ladies and gentlemen, 12 and 14 hours a day, 6 or 7 days a week for 300 euros? Yes, your life standards have increased massively and you're in absolutely the right kind of mood to go out and advocate for these rights. What the proposition is doing is massively empowering the capitalists, massively empowering the business elites that are the ones that are going to be advocating the reduction of these labor standards overall, ladies and gentlemen. It's not going to be the desperate young people who are afraid of their job that do this, right? That's the kind of person where you can get fired at any point. You can't unionize, right? You can't exert pressure on your employer. You can't ask for these rights because you're going to get fired. This is the kind of world that they're creating for young people. Which brings me on to how this affects on the labor force as a whole. And there are two issues here. Firstly, how this leads to lower regulations and labor regulations for everyone. And secondly, why this makes older people less employable, and that's a bad thing, which also responds to the first proposition case. In terms of lowering labor regulations for everyone, we think we can do this both in practice, because people are going to start accepting different conditions, even if the legal framework hasn't changed yet, but we also think that she leads to a change in the legal framework for everyone. Firstly, because you create a massive normative shift, right? The opposition, we keep giving already a case on why we have to accept labor regulations as being something incredibly important and a right of every employee to prevent exploitation. At the point where you say that it's okay to try to address economic problems by getting rid of these kind of protections, it becomes constantly more acceptable in society, both for the people, the employees themselves, the employers, the political elites, that this is not something that's necessary, right? This is not a basic right, it's something we do as a luxury when times are good. That, ladies and gentlemen, means it's much easier to justify for everyone overall. But it also makes people less employable and older people less employable, right? Because now we have to compete with people for positions with young people who are more profitable for the employer. That's what the proposition is doing, right? We're getting more money out of young people for the employer. Ladies and gentlemen, youth unemployment may be higher in many of these cases, but that doesn't exist in a context where unemployment is not high overall, right? Usually high youth unemployment exists in a context of high employment. The problem is, ladies and gentlemen, that the weakest members in the labor force, older people whose skills may not be as valuable and as marketable, now have to compete with younger people who are willing and able and allowed to work for less. Ladies and gentlemen, overall, this is a reduction of everything. Our case is very simple, that this harms young people, it harms employees, it does not address the issues, and it just panders to the interests of business elites. And for these reasons, we like to propose.
I thank the earlier speaker, and now we welcome the member of opposition.
We're going to take, on closing government, look exactly at what it is that these labor laws actually are supposed to give us. And we're going to show you where it is unemployment that hurts those things more, just like specifically about work and exploitation. We're going to explain to you the specific urgency which we have in the EU, which makes it possible, which makes it important for us to implement this. And we're going to tell you why, don't worry, standards will rise again, as they have before, as they have in the past, blah, blah. Before that, a few things to rebuttal. We've heard this notion from closing opposition, although tried to steal it, that they'll suddenly be flooded by young workers and that the old will be kicked out. We have four things to say about this. First, we think we are actually, as the open government showing you, we are increasing the pie of amount of jobs available. So it's not necessarily a zero-sum game. But beyond that, we think that this is better in the long term, because what is happening now is that we are creating a lost generation of Europeans that don't actually have skills, and we do need to think long term, so it's okay to retire out people. Firstly, fourth, as OG has already told you, thirdly, they have more experience and they're less likely to get capped, but more importantly, and this is something that they don't understand, the way we support the weak in our society works on a pyramid scheme. The many support the few who are in trouble. The problem with large youth unemployment is that there are more youth, and right now the few older people are now those supporting the youth in an upside-down pyramid. Even if we end up retiring out our older people, we will be able to support them more likely with pensions or unemployment or things like that. So we're still fine. Then they tell us, listen, people are going to agree to ludicrous things because they're desperate for a job. We say they're desperate for a job because they aren't any, and we're creating them. Then they say, it tells people there's a normative value that this is okay to do. Yes, we're fine with that too. Unemployment is worse, and we want people to know that. Let's see why. Listen, why are labor laws there? They're there to defend you. They're there to defend you for two things. First, your self-worth as an individual. Exactly because we don't like the idea that anything can be done to you. That's something we like protecting. Second, they're there, give you a sense of worth that you can't just be fired, we agree. Second, there's the issue of exploitation, which they brought up. Let's see how employment gets both of these. Deals with both of these. So first of all, in terms of your worth, ladies and gentlemen, we live in a society that values the dollar, that values the euro, that values money. We tie worth to currency, we tie worth to money. Imagine what it means in chronic unemployment, when month after month you are told that there is no one in the world that thinks that you are worthy of that value, of that thing that you keep hearing is valuable. We think that's bad. No. Then there's furthermore the issue of you becoming dependent. Listen, when you're unemployed over time, you become dependent in the state where that is possible. Some people just run out of their unemployment benefits, but that happens too, quite a lot. Also, you become dependent on your parents. And you know about the mama that takes care of their children until they're 35. I'm sorry, Mom. But still. Okay? This makes you a burden to the people around you. This makes you dependent. It actually makes another person your master. Now you would say, wait a second, isn't that the same as work? The issue is that when you're dependent on unemployment, you can't, on chronic unemployment, you can't escape it. While when there are more jobs, as the open government has shown you, you are more likely to be able to go to another place. Leaving a job is very hard, we know, but it is impossible to leave chronic unemployment, and we think that it's much better to have that sort of thing. Not yet, okay? So we think this is worse in terms of like what exactly protects them worse. Now, what about the issue of exploitation? And guess what? They're right. As Selena said, I think it was Selena, employers can be quite ruthless. We know this, Mark said so, it must be true. However, while this is a problem, okay, we still think it is better to be in a situation where if that happens, you have an option to escape, whether in the actions of unemployment, which keeps you in this dependent mindset, where you're not worth anything, where you're less likely to be politically active as a result, where you're less likely to do good things. But furthermore, listen, we're not Bangladesh. We're in the EU, as they said. There is a limit to how much people will be able to get used to. Why? Because we have one of the best medias in the world that will cover these things. Because these are juicy stories that interest people. Because let's face it, we are the West. We invented these values. We gave the world Marx. We gave the world liberal things. We're not going to just stop caring about it because we realize we have to make a certain change in an environment of urgency. And the last thing is, and this is very interesting, guys, if we don't do this and the jobs move to Bangladesh, where do you think there will be more exploitation of human beings? I prefer the jobs here than passing over that exploitation to Bangladesh, to India, and to other countries. So even if there will be some of it, we can mitigate it, they can't. Urgency, okay? Being unemployed, as I'm going to tell you, helps your experience, helps your skills, helps your, hurts your skills, hurts your social skills, your ability to create, like, the environment around you, how to create work with, how to produce things. We're creating a lost generation which basically does not have the people around them to show them to create work ethic, to show them all these things, which means that if you don't do it now, they will have no one to learn from. Closing.
Okay, so you're saying that value has to do with money. So you actually solidifies the devaluation of exactly these kind of populations who already feel weakened, not only in front of their own government, but in front of the stronger countries in the EU.
Madam, if I found a way to desolidify it, you know me well enough to know I would. But the fact is, this is the world we live in. If you don't actually make money, there's less things you can do with yourself and you're less happy. Why standards rise, and this is important. First of all, once people have the job experience, once they stop working, what we will see is that they will increase their output as a worker. What does this mean? This means, A, that they're more likely to be worth more money, so more people are going to want to pay for more money. Furthermore, it means they're less likely to be fired, because once you invested experience in a worker, you're less likely to want to fire that worker, and I think that in itself is a good thing. But furthermore, because we will now have money coming in from investment, because people will create, we will have more money flowing. What does this mean? I have no reason, Mr. Speaker, to open. Is it Mr. Speaker? Who's speaking? You? Madam, sorry. Okay, there we go. Good for you. Okay? I have no reason, actually, to open a shop next to your in your neighborhood if I don't think you have money. However, if you now have money, you have something to spend, that makes it more likely for me to open a kiosk. That is another job. That creates mobility and dynamics within society. We think this is a good thing. Madam Speaker, we've shown you so far why the labor laws, what they're there to defend, why unemployment actually makes all these things worse. We've shown you why this form of exploitation can be mitigated while it might happen. We've shown you why this is urgent. We've shown you why we're okay with kicking out the old, and we've shown you why eventually standards will rise. Finally, I am from Israel, not from Poland, but having been from Poland, I could have told you there's a sign there that says that work will free you, so we will.
Order, and I welcome the member of opposition to bring on their case.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, today I'm going to talk to you about two things. First of all, I'm going to talk to you why it is immoral to engage in this proposition, which will actually hurt the older generation of workers and citizens in general, and society in general. And second, I'm gonna analyze the relationship of this youth with the state under this proposition, and I will show you why in our world we will bring the revolution, we will change the corrupt system, and this is the best thing that could happen to a state like Greece and Spain and so forth. Let's start with a quick rebuttal. Okay. Basically, what we heard a lot from Michael about opting out from unemployment and how unemployment is awful and so forth. Our problem with your world is that you have less the ability to opt out of a bad work. Meaning in your world, the worker is much closer to a scenario of near slavery. Because as I'm going to show you, and as I already said quite clearly in my POI, you have an incentive to and you also have the opportunity for the entire market to downgrade workers' protection in general, because it is much easier for me now as an employer to hurt workers at all. Meaning, right now, I don't really have a lot of options, whether I am under the age of 26 or above the age of 26, to opt out of bad exploitive jobs. Now, I'm pretty sure that like the way here is very simple. I think it is better to be unemployed and feel a little bit self-conscious about it, rather than feeling that you are fucking enslaved. Sorry, excuse my language. I feel very strongly about this. Sorry, that you are being enslaved by stronger elements that include corporations that are not even from your own country. No. Our problem, no. We seriously, like our problem with the whole case of government that they agree that at the end of the day, things are going to stay the same. Meaning, the corruption that within those states that we're talking about, the link between the economic elites and the political elites will stay the same. The lack of incentive to benefit with the working class, the lack of incentive to redistribute resources in a fair and just way simply will not exist. And this is a bad world. We don't want this world. What do we want? Okay, let's start with, let's start first of all with the moral concept. Why is it immoral to do this proposition? Because we are hurting the older generation and so forth. Look, it is very commonsensical to see that we are incentivizing employers to fire like 30-something-year-olds, 40-something-year-olds, and to replace them with like an 18-year-old, invest maybe a year in training them, and then squeeze the life out of them because they don't have protections in terms of working hours and so forth, and get a good 6 years, and then chuck them to the street and get a replacement. We think that like a 19-year-old employee can live with his mother and father. We're okay with that. It's not nice, but it's okay. We think that when mother and father are being fired, not only that they are on the street, not only the 19-year-old is on the street, but also maybe like the younger siblings are on the street, meaning you are hurting complete families, you are hurting also older dependent parents under that model. You are really increasing the circumstance of people who are being hurt by this proposition. Furthermore, this proposition is unsustainable because if you have more employers who get really, really low wages, your tax income, the income that you make out of taxes is lower. You have no money for education. You have no money for healthcare. Meaning the kids in this country are getting basically cheated out of their own future and so forth. You have nobody to pay the pensions for future and so forth. What we're talking about, this is like a classic trolling problem, right? What you're trying to do, you're trying to throw the old, like the parents, the older generation under the wheel in order to like somehow save the youth. But that makes no sense. Youth have more alternative. They can migrate. They can go to school. They can still live with their parents who think that this is a valid option. Older people has less opportunities to handle this situation. Now, basically what we're saying is you're hurting more people. You're hurting people who are not really to blame in this situation. You have more people in this situation. You have no justification to do something.
Madam, the youth are a larger group, therefore their unemployment includes more people. As I've shown you in my analysis, the standards will eventually rise, therefore we will have money to support those who will be screwed by this proposition. They exist.
Thank you. First of all, we don't buy that the standards will rise. It's completely counterintuitive. Why would employers do it once that the state right now is like decreasing its protection of its own citizens? And that takes me to my second point. We are talking about a revolution. Look, we think that there are two scenarios here. Let's talk about like a first scenario where people, you have like the corporation, Chinese corporation, American corporation, German corporation coming in, exploiting the youth, because this is what actually going to happen. The young people are going to stay poor because they are getting low wages. They still don't have money to buy stuff and move out and everything. What we do see is their country being dependent upon those foreign states. They consolidate their like nationalistic rage with their class rage in such a situation, meaning you're actually already making a gateway for more extremism and so forth. But what do we really want to happen? We want those unemployed people on the street. We want this kind of class rage exactly the way it is. People being upset with the system. We want people saying, we're the 99% and we're going to make the street, no. We are going to riot in the street until everything that is corrupt with the economic system, everything that is invested in exploiting me and making myself almost a serf of those corporations, we want those people to re-empower themselves. We want them to bully the 1% into redistributing resources in a fair and just manner. And if you agree, and if all sides of our position think that things are just going to get a little bit better and it will be okay, then your world is worse than our world, and we call you to oppose.
So then we welcome the government whip to summarize this debate for us. Here you go.
It seems like closing opposition really wants to talk about a Marxist revolution, even though I'm privately very supportive towards that. The history already showed us that those revolutions tend not to really be that successful, and they mostly turn into really dictatorship systems and regimes that tend to be even more corrupted, even worse treating in terms of treating people, etc., etc. But number two, if they're so certain that unemployment leads to socialist revolution, then my question is, what are those socialist revolutions all over Europe, and how come people are already not on the streets rioting? Well, obviously that's not really something that is obviously happening, and therefore we need to offer an alternative. My summary is going to be why we think the job is important, secondly why we think that exploitation is not going to be as bad as they're trying to represent, and in the end how it gets better. Before that, a couple of points of rebuttal. So in terms of slavery they talk about, let me tell you one thing, when you have no job, you are by a definition a slave. You depend on someone's money, on someone's will to give you that money. You long-termly become the slave because you cannot develop your own abilities and your own capabilities, which you can develop while you work, which means that you put yourself in a situation to be completely dependent, A, on someone's will to give you money, and B, whether or not one day you might develop your skills. With the job, yes, if standards are lower, maybe you're not going to be in a good position as you would be if the standards were. But you're most certainly much less of a slave than you are without a job. Firstly, you have your own money, therefore you have your agency to decide what you want to do with money. But B, you get to develop your skills. Once you have the skills and once you have the money, you have choices. Go to the other state which will offer you better solutions. Open your own store, invest in your own businesses. You get to decide what you want and you have some means to fulfill what you actually want. Now they talk about that morality and older people. Sad story, bro. Yes. Some families will probably be in a situation where the child will have to finance the parent, but that is in the end the same. It's mother financing the child or child financing the mother. But more importantly, they never respond to what Michael explained to you with the pyramid, where majority today are actually the youth, and that this system cannot sustain because at some point, vast majority of people will not have money, while a minority of older people will continue to give them money, and we will hit the wall at some point. With this, you have majority working, investing in the minority. That's what we want to say. Let's also talk about the structural problem. If this is really a structural problem, in order for you to solve it, you need awareness of people about it, and you need motivation from the people to actually work on it. People are not motivated and people are not aware because they keep thinking whether or not I'm going to get a job and be able to pay for my bills. Because my primary focus is to satisfy my basic needs, which are not being satisfied exactly because I don't have a job. Which means the structural problem cannot be solved. Once they give you a job, once you get a salary, once you satisfy some of your needs, that is the question when you start asking yourself, do we have structural problems within the society? And what can we do to solve this kind of issues? Because once you're hungry, you don't really think about capitalism and communism and which one of the two fits you better. Also, I want to say, it's not going to happen that they're going to work 12 hours a day for $5. Firstly, it's European Union, so it ain't going to happen. But be even more, even if people at the beginning turn out to be very happy because they got a job, therefore de-incentivize to in any way change something, also not going to happen. Why? First, you're going to get tired of the fact that your standards are being lower, and exactly because your standards are being lower, you will start demanding for more. But secondly, you will become better at what you're doing, and therefore you will have an option to choose where do you want to work and why do you want to work somewhere. And you will be able to make your demands and then to satisfy them. But more on that in my class. Before that, yes.
So if if youth are the majority, you're actually conceding to the fact that you are lowering the standard and you're normalizing.
Yeah, we are doing that because at the end they will get up, and I will tell you that in my third flash. First, importance of a job. So we think that even though standards are very important, job is more important. Why? Firstly, because you get to earn some money. In today's society, as Michael pointed out, we value based on the amount of money we have. But more importantly, it is our independence. It is my ability to do something and to get the means to continue doing what I want to do and to do it in a way in which I want to do it, not to depend on someone's will to give me money and then to depend on someone's will what can or cannot or can't do with that money exactly because that money is mine. Also, we think that the second problem with that is without a job, you generally feel worthless. You're not contributing to the society. You're not doing something that you want. You're generally one very, very, very depressed person with lack of motivation to do anything. But thirdly, more importantly, which is a practical impact, what's going to happen to your skills? Theoretical knowledge in today's society is not enough. The fact that I read something about management is not going to help me become a good manager. The only way for me to become a good manager is to actually start doing it, to practice it, to go through it. That's number one. But number two, have social job skills. I need to know how to work with people, how to do meetings, how to do emails, how to do a bunch of other stuff that jobs in 21st century are demanding. I can't learn that by sitting in my house or writing on the street, which obviously I'm not going to do, already proven with my rebuttal. So what does that mean? I need a job for experience and I need experience for a job, which means that urgency of the job is much more important than standards. Because once I get a job, even with low standards, I get to practice all of these stuff that I told you and earn some money, which gives me my independence. And then later on, have the ability to fight against low standards and to fight against some things that I'm not satisfied. But more importantly, I get my time. Because even if I get a job when I'm 25, and let's say I'm not that, I don't have such a good standards, the thing is I have more time to practice, which means that I would sooner become extremely better at what I do, rather than if I get a job when I'm 35, and therefore I don't have the time to practice and develop all the skills that are required. So it's an entire generation that is going to be lost if we don't get them a job. Now let's flash for that exploitation I want to talk about. Standards will be low, but not too low. Why? It's the European Union. What does that mean? Firstly, general regulations of the European Union are much more harsh in terms of human rights and protection than in third world countries, which means that based on other regulations that we have, we will have to fulfill some standards. Secondly, media. Juicy story. Everyone will talk about it. Therefore, if you're torturing your workers too much, obviously they're going to talk about it. Obviously that's going to end up in the media. Thirdly, if you're our borders. Thirdly, if we don't give them a job here, obviously companies cannot put high standards right now. They're going to go to those third world countries that you are talking about, and then they will treat those people there even worse, but there will be no European Union or media to protect those people. Now let's talk about standards. When you give people money and when you satisfy their basic needs, that's the moment when they start thinking about human rights. That is how we got to labor rights in the first place. People got a job, worked for minimum wage, and then at some point realized, I want to work for a bigger amount of money and smaller amount of hours. And that's how they created labor rights in the first place. And we can also see Foxconn. Foxconn, even though much bad place to be, is still becoming better and better exactly because people are constantly demanding so. And why? I mean, obviously why they demand so, but why will companies agree to that? They will agree to that because once people have the money, they will be able to purchase their power to buy stuff, the demand will be able to rise, companies will be interested in coming in those places, opening more jobs, and that is the moment where unemployment is not a problem as it was before. For all these reasons, proud to propose.
I thank the previous speaker and then we welcome the opposition to summarise this debate for us.
Sometimes, in order to rebuild the city, you need to destroy it. And that is what we are saying. Because everyone in this debate conceded to the idea that there is a major structural issue in the economy that makes the 99% continue being slaves and even being worse off eventually over time. And yet they say there is nothing to do about it. You know what? Lie. We say that when people are outraged, when people go to the street, and only when people realize that this is their own went out on the streets, and they did gain changes. We see it in the Arab Spring when people were hungry for bread, so they went against their dictatorship. We see that this can happen, and further than that, we say that you do not even need to have this revolution, but you need the people on the street outraged in order to create some sort of concession from the people that are now controlling the politics and the economy, but have no incentive on change. What they tell you is, oh, we'll simply give up to those who want to make us slaves. And they didn't even show that it is a moral thing to do for a certain group and not for others. So they are simply dividing the people, and the people that can go to the streets will not see that they have a problem. Now I'm going to explain why even under their world, the economy won't be better over time. Then I'm going to talk about why we need to have the rich, and then I'm going to talk about why we also care about the rest of our citizens, and they did not show why young people are more important for us morally. But let's start with the economy. So their entire case is based on the idea that we will have a middle class eventually. But we do not think that this will happen. Why is that? They tell us that there will be an improvement of conditions because we have the EU values and the EU will not let that happen. But the motion says that the EU will let it happen. And we don't think that the values are the ones that are going to change that, especially since it is not happening in the status quo. Already we have more privatization of businesses. Already we have companies that are not even registered in the EU, but in some sort of other island that will give them taxes exemption and so on. So there is no way of even controlling them with your values. Now, second of all, they tell us, oh, but we will not want to fire the young people because they now have experience which is available for the company. But you know what? If I'm only turning a screwdriver, I don't think that there isn't anyone on the street that can do the same job. So why not fire me for someone who will cost me less money? And they did not talk about the kind of jobs that are going to be. So we assume that those jobs will be of the lower end of the scale, meaning that we do not really need that experience and that it will not help them find or create new jobs in the future. Now, they tell us that there will be new jobs. Why is that? We don't think that a country like Spain can really compete with Bangladesh or China and so on because they won't be as cheap as those places still. And they cannot compete with Germany that gives its employers a very good education, meaning that they are skilled enough in order to get more money. So they will be in the middle, not really creating new jobs and not giving any beneficial value, meaning that you do not have those jobs. And about growth, you know what? Maybe those businesses would make more money, but why don't they give higher salaries for their companies when they can give it as a dividend to their own CEOs for having a good job done, which we already see in the status quo. So they do not show us that we have a better economy. First, that they tell us, oh, it will be good for the unemployed because they will feel better. But they are ignoring the end point of, if I value myself according to money, and I know that I'm now not worth as the German employee, then I feel really bad about myself. It means that because of my nationality, I am a priori worse off and not as good as others, meaning that I do not get that feeling of self-worth and so on. And you know what? I'm still a slave working 14 hours a day, and I can be fired every day and not being able to feed myself. So I still feel really bad under your scenario, and there is no hope for the future. Now, let's talk about the point of the revolution, because they're trying to put a band-aid on a problem and simply pacify it. So even if we agree to everything that they tell us, that people will be better, that people will feel, that people will not rebel, we say that this is terrible, because we have a majority of people that are simply pacified and have no motivation of going out against the system because they are a bit better off. We say that this is problematic because it allows the elites to continue on exploiting those people, and you have no one putting pressure on them to change. We say that, like Marx, we need this. You need people to feel worse about themselves until they reach a point of culmination in which they cannot take it anymore, and that is when they will unite together to fight against the system. And we believe that the rich people that already feel that there is a certain witch hunt against them will now
way, it's not what Mark said. He said the working class, not the starving animals.
Okay, this brings me to my second point, because we do not believe that they will reach a point of dying. And you know what? Even under your world, they will still starve and they will still be worse off because of what I told you. Because when you have a majority of people that are now of a low income, you have less taxes going to the state, meaning that you have less unemployment money to give. It means that you have less basic infrastructures to give, meaning that their lives and their children's lives will be worse off, and you cannot even fund the pensions of the older generation because you do not have enough money that is being invested. So we say that if it comes to being in a bad situation in the status quo, or being in a slightly bad situation, but eventually changing the system for you and the other generations, we would rather go for the revolution because it creates more hope and not a situation of despair. And okay, we're ran out of time, but it did show why young people are more important, and we say that you cannot kill one in order to save another randomly. So for all those reasons, please.
So we thank all the